Welcome to another webinar for the digital experience community. We are vendor agnostic free community where we share ideas and educate each other. So please, if you haven't joined yet, please join us. We're at digitalexperience.community or use the QR code, which is over there. Today we have our roundtable. It's about content authoring experience. We have our three distinguished guests. So I'll go ahead and kick it off. Emma, could you introduce yourself for us, please?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Emma Horrell. I work as the User Experience Manager at the University of Edinburgh in the UK. My experience of content authoring comes from doing some work with the editing community at Edinburgh University during an upgrade of our content management system and trying to make our new system more friendly for those who are editing and producing content on our web pages. So that's me.
All right, Greg, do you want to go next?
Sure. My name is Greg Dunlap. I'm the Director of Strategy at a digital agency called Lullabot. We specialize in large-scale publishing systems, primarily using Drupal. I'm also the upcoming author of the book Designing Content Authoring Experiences, which I just successfully completed a Kickstarter for. And so I've now have a lot of work to do. And I've been doing, CMS custom developments and builds for about 20 years.
Last but not least.
Yeah, I'm Knut, and for the 6 last years, I've been with Sanity, which is like a headless CMS or whatever you call it. And before that, I was like a couple of years at an agency doing a lot of like CMS salvaging stuff. And before that, I have done like web development with WordPress and stuff for a long time. It feels now. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. So Greg, could you kick us off by getting into what exactly is content authoring experience and why should we care?
Yeah, I mean, I think that content authoring experience is basically the experience that your content authors have when they are using your CMS. So a lot of that is maybe filling out forms basically to do content entry. A lot of it may be the tools that they can use to find or manage content, workflow tools, dashboards, that kind of thing. It may be some kind of visual layout or page building tools, but whatever your actual authors who are creating and managing the content and how it's arranged on the pages is their authoring experience. And the reason it matters is I think that a lot of people don't really give a lot of thought to it because those people are kind of at the bottom of the totem pole in a lot of organizations. Like you've got your director of marketing and your director of IT and all these people building your CMSs, and these people are down there using it every day, but they're kind of forgotten about. And the thing about it is if they hate using your CMS or aspects of it are very difficult to use, they won't use it. Like they will avoid the things that are irritating. They will put off updating content. They will only do what they absolutely have to. And as an organization that, spends a lot of money putting a CMS together to meet their goals for their content, that's not really in your best interest. So getting a system that they can actually use and without it being a struggle is actually really important.
Emma, since you had mentioned that you kind of got into this part, right? Like, do you think the authoring experience is ignored, like Greg was alluding to?
Yes, yes and no. I think I'm not sure if it's ignored on purpose. I think there's not really an appreciation that how important it is to get it right for everything that Greg has just said, because if it's difficult to use, then we as humans will find like the easiest way, the way that matches our mental models to produce content. And if we are presented with a content management system that requires a lot of thought and requires a lot of effort, then people will look for shortcuts. And the way I see that manifest at the University of Edinburgh is it results in poor content across the websites. That has a knock-on effect to how our key audiences to our website find content and the tasks that they need to complete on our web pages. And I feel there's two things. I feel from our perspective, appreciating how content authors use a CMS and trying to make that experience as good as it possibly can do. It does two things. It builds trust with that authoring community, which for us at Edinburgh is important because it brings people on board with the system we've provided them to use, but also it results in better content, which is a win as well for all the reasons that people do content design, right? So I don't know if it's necessarily ignored. I think people just underestimate or like underappreciate how important it is and how it does actually facilitate better content in the long run, which is the goal that most organizations are reaching to.
Yeah, no, makes sense. So, Knut, what can we all do, right? Like as vendors, customers, or authors, like what can we do to vocalize that a little bit more, showcase how important this is?
I think it's kind of like implied in what Greg and Emma said already, and I'm kind of like I'm not disagreeing with Greg, but I have like a bit of nuance because one thing is that people tend to avoid things that are hard, kind of, or like just sucks. But the even sadder thing is sometimes those things like are in your way of like you're doing your job, so you have to get through it. And like when people have to go through and jump through hoops and do stuff like in very roundabout particular way just to do their job, that's when this gets really sad, right? And what I've also found, especially with people who call themselves non-technical for whatever reason, even though they do technology all day, they tend, like, I think what they sometimes aren't aware of is that they have some agency and they can have a voice in terms of how technology should work, right? But people, including ourselves in this room, probably they don't like. We don't think that we can kind of like object to this system or like expect more, right? So we never say that, and then it never gets picked up by the very, very idealistic product managers who are constantly looking for that feedback and so on, and look at through like data analysis and so on. So like, yeah, I think maybe kind of like getting that user voice forth is a good first step, probably.
Yeah, I think one of the things that there's a quote that I use all the time that Dean Barker said in one of his books, and it's that the single most common reason that people replace their CMS is their editors hate it. And I think, and so, you know, I agree with you with that, you know, they should speak up when their systems are bad. The problem is they also then need to be brought into the conversation when the new systems get built. And that's where that's where I see a lot of the failures. So no, I think we're both totally in agreement on that.
So you mentioned something interesting, Knut, like we should bring the authors to the table, but do you think bringing like designers or strategy people to the table to figure out what a proper authoring experience should be helps, or does it complicate it?
It's interesting with this content stuff because it is like in the middle of everything, right? Like it has implications all like in all directions. Like developers, oh yeah, this is deciding how like our data looks like and how we program. Essentially, we should have like in on that table. Like as we talked about content authors, like they are actually typing in it stuff or copy pasting into stuff all day, and then designers are supposed to kind of like make a presentation for this and so on. So yeah, maybe there's like a grand multidisciplinary workflow thing that we haven't discovered yet. But yeah, starts to be kind of like a long time since I've been like in the weeds of all of that. So I'm excited to hear Greg and Emma maybe talk to that more. I'm super interested.
Well, I mean, I know the way that we work at Lullabot is extremely interdisciplinary. Like, we always have representatives from every role at the beginning of our project. So we always have a content strategist, a designer, a backender, and a front ender, putting everything together. And we work extremely collaboratively with the client. And then when we work with the client, we also insist that those same roles plus the content authors are present on their end. And it's complicated, but it's completely necessary too. And especially I think the need for content people and design people in the build and first development of a CMS is often very ignored. And I think, but there's a lot of things that those people bring to the table that I think is really helpful. I know Emma actually went through this process semi-recently. So
yeah, so at Edinburgh we have a distributed community of web publishers which basically means that lots of people have access to edit and manage content on our web pages across the estate, and they have varying degrees of skills and time and resource to put to this. So I saw an opportunity basically with the upgrade of our content management system from Drupal 7 to 10 to now take the opportunity to learn from our web publishing community about the things that the common things that they use, that looking at the content across the web estate and drilling down into the workflows and the mental models and the series of stages they take to do those to achieve the content on the web page, and then try and flip that and embed it into the CMS. So for example, where possible, make things a kind of default option. We have in our Drupal 7 instance, there was a large body text editor that encouraged a lot of copying and pasting of content. And we're a university, right? So we have a lot of words on our web pages. And there's a propensity to just take a Word document or a PDF, a very heavy academic text, and just drop it onto web pages. And the old version of the CMS really encouraged that because there was this open body text editor. So a person was kind of in the zone to just make that an easy thing and then just hit publish. So with the new CMS and the opportunity with Drupal paragraphs, we saw the chance to kind of make that process a bit more thought through. So they have to structure into headings and chunk the text. And actually, when you get people to do that, it produces better content, and it helps them to kind of start thinking about what the content's there for. And the upshot of that is just publishing less, but actually publishing better quality was one way around it. There were other things like implementing default fields for alt text to make sure that that accessibility was covered when images were added, positioning buttons in a particular way that would help people to sort of work through workflows and make it less it meant that they had to sort of scroll less, and it was kind of more aligned with the way that they were publishing content. So they might seem like small things, and I've watched a lot. I spent many hours watching people interact with the CMS and sort of screenshotting it out. But when you think of how many times that is happening on our web estate to publish content and manage content, if you can make it more streamlined or make it better, then it has a big impact cumulatively and overall. I mean, it's short-term improvements for a longer-term game is how I see it. But yeah, it was getting that. We're not as developed as yourselves at Lullabot in terms of the product setup, but for me, it was recognizing the opportunity this upgrade was going to happen. So why not take the opportunity to try and make it a better authoring experience in the process? So yeah, I kind of barged my way through and got that work off the ground. Yep.
Emma, because it sounds like in that process you kind of were able to add more, like we all in developers, I work a lot with developer education, so I often bring that perspective. We call it setting up guardrails. And doesn't sound fun to set up guardrails or be within those things, but it creates for neat data in the other end of this stuff. But how are content offers, do they enjoy having those guardrails, or is it annoying, and why?
It's interesting because so we see different things. So we see some people who want the guardrails in place because it enforces a way of working that they're trying to enforce, but to try and get, if like you alluded to this a bit earlier on, people will choose the easiest option. So if that easy option is there and they can just dump whatever it is into a body text field, they will take it. And then if you're managing a website and a member of your staff's doing that, it's really hard to kind of shift that. But putting a guardrails in, it makes it, look, this is this is a system that is now, we're doing things differently, and here's how you can do it. And I think the guardrails work if you're then supporting that with training and guidance. So we're not just changing the CMS and going like, here you go, you have to work this way. We're supporting it with, here's a content design training program that we're offering to help you understand why and the benefits of doing this, and why you should be spending your time, because you still have to spend time. Even if you copy and paste stuff in, it's still time. So spend it more wisely on actually producing the content, because you don't need thousands of words on a page. You need a couple of hundred words, but spend the time getting those words right. So we've tried to, it's been a kind of, there's various strands to this, is what I'm trying to say. It's not just a question of putting the CMS out there and leaving people to it. It's been well supported with training, guidance, and all the rest of it that goes with this. And that kind of comes back to the long game, and seeing the sort of bigger picture and how these different strands feed in to support it.
So
I think one of the things that we struggle with a lot is that we see, especially in organizations that have sort of like, I don't want to say less technical, but content authors who are not familiar with the web and with web content and its needs. It's like web content in the modern age is complicated, right? It has to be accessible. It has to be mobile friendly. It has to be, in many cases, accessible to other, systems to read from or publish to, and when you've got content authors whose understanding of those things is not as mature, then you get into a situation where you've got a real conflict, because they want everything to be very simple, and the web is just not very simple anymore. And so I think one of the things that we do is, and that we talk about a lot, is the same thing that Emma was just talking about, which is like making the right way easy and the wrong way hard, rather than the other way around. Because when you've got a body field, what you're doing is you're saying, the wrong way is the easiest thing, and you're giving people the opportunity to do it. Whereas if you can put things together in a different way and make it easier to do the right thing, then you're in a much better place for your people. And that can be a struggle sometimes. And sometimes you do have to create things that are more complicated than authors want. They don't understand alt text or meta description, or why they need to taxonomize their images. Why can't I just upload them, and things like that. And that's where I think the training and education part comes really handy too. Yeah.
Are we lacking kind of like affordances in these CMS and tools to also kind of like highlight why these things are valuable?
I think that
rhetorical question. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's hard because a lot of when your authors have different priorities than your system does, it can be difficult. Like at a university, a lot of times the people putting content into the system are academics, right? They're subject matter experts in something, and their priorities are all around getting the information out there, having their name attached to it, about raising the standing of their group with other academics and things like that, right? It's not the audience that the university as a whole may be trying to publish for. So I think that differing priorities and goals can kind of like complicate things there.
So is there, like, from what you guys are saying, right, this is a specific use case for a university, but is there like a best practice for authoring experience, or you have to kind of build it based on your base of who's entering the content and how the organization is structured?
I feel like we see it like a lot of in the SEO field, like it or not. Like those folks are pretty like into getting very quick feedback on how these content things, like how are they working, kind of, right? Like the famous like Yoast plugin for WordPress, right? Super popular because it gives you that type of feedback on the impact of the content. But I haven't seen that as much in other fields, like a footnote credibility counter in a university CMS. I don't know, but yeah, it's interesting.
I tend to think that there's not a lot of there. I mean, there is best practice. There's best practice in form design, and there's best practice in UI and stuff. But my experience has been that your organizational goals and the authors that you have implementing them influence what's best for any given CMS build enormously. Like we will approach the authoring experience very differently at a startup with very technical marketing users who understand the web and mobile and SEO and things like that than we will for a state government where most of the people are in subject matter experts or administrative roles. And we may have to sacrifice some of the, purity of our structured content in order to make sure that we can get the best product out that the authors are available to give. And whereas in the other case where we have people who are much more mature in their understanding, we may approach it differently, even if their content and goals of the organization are largely the same. So I don't know if there is a lot there is, I don't know. There's a lot of things that you can do that I think are standard that are good, but I also think there's a lot that's custom to your use case.
So
I would. Sorry, I was just coming on that, and I would agree. And it is worth taking the time to research that and understand. Otherwise, you run the risk of like abstracted generic information can be open to interpretation, and then your best efforts to get a consistent end experience, can fall foul if you don't have that time. And I think it's also a trust building exercise as well. If people think that you've taken the time to learn how they want to use the CMS and that you're going to take that forward in the best way you can, given the constraints you're working in with whatever CMS you have, I think it brings them on board. And like any change, or any behavioral change, certainly that you want to try and implement, making people feel empowered in that space, I think is really helpful to move forward.
Makes sense. I'm going to throw in a big word in here, page builders. Like, what do they help? Is it more painful? Is it more choice for the authoring experience? Like I typically, when I'm building something, I love the form-based content authoring experience because I could be quick. I know exactly what I'm doing. I just want to go through it. But I know that it depends on the type of content you're entering as well as on the person. But where do page builders fit into all of this?
What is a page builder and who is a page builder?
Ooh, page builder. I mean, the way I would put it is like visually building a page with components rather than a form, like Greg had mentioned, in terms of how a typical CMS lets you enter content.
So you mean like a sort of drag and drop experience of components?
Yeah.
I think certainly from my experience at Edinburgh, both have a place, and it's about understanding the end product for both. I mean, at Edinburgh, as I said, we have quite a lot of text-heavy content, and for those, a form can be better. I have a bugbear at Edinburgh. We have a lot of pages where we have a lot of generic images, and I think part of the root of that is the what we had in our previous version of Drupal was a kind of like a landing page template. So people would design it and they would see a sea of like little boxes to fill in, and then they would just pick out images to make all the boxes look symmetrical. But actually the content, as in the links and the words on the page, were what our end users are looking for, and they've got a sea of meaningless images. It also meant that a lot of the web pages looked the same, and it was difficult to differentiate between them because you were seeing the same images and confusing two pages together. So I feel it's maybe a bit of, a page builder can be good for certain types of content like landing pages, and forms can be better for others. So it's maybe about positioning them in front of the author and explaining why, and giving some really good solid examples of when they might use both from my experience.
Yeah, I think that I agree with that. Like we mostly use it for things like marketing landing pages and stuff like that. Like for the main content in the system, we tend to lean away from page builders. And I find that when people are using them for all of the content in the system is when those people get into trouble, especially when they need to, migrate out of it later, or they need to do some kind of analysis of their content, and it's all broken into these not meaningless pieces that are scattered all over their page. But I think that there's also ways to design page building experiences such that they adhere to the principles of structured semantic content. But it's a lot of work to do that. And my experience has been that mostly people don't do that. They say, oh, here's an image with text on the right side, or here's a 3-column layout and stuff like that doesn't have any really semantic meaning behind the content. And then what you're left with is just a lot of words that you can't figure out what they belong to or are a part of. And that's where the trouble begins a lot of the times. And, when I think about like a landing page, like there's no real content on that page generally. It's just pointers to other content most of the time. And those are the places where we tend to focus on that more.
I feel I should be like, maybe I should have been replaced by like a page builder advocate from Webflow or Wix or something to get some kind of diversity in this crowd, because I suspect we're all kind of like, we like the structured content stuff and so on, and like this marketing landing page, like kind of like it's kind of like a thing, and like who reads those, who click the CTAs to. Turns out a lot of people read them and they click the CTAs. They work, so it's very hard to ignore, right? But yeah, I agree with Greg. Like, there's like this sliding scale of page building freedom, and you can kind of like bake structured content stuff into them. And it's weirdly how this design pattern is like so solidified. Like, it's always like these sections, right, in a order.
The grid,
like,
yeah.
The imaging, and then so it's, I wonder if that will change soon. But yeah, like as a CMS vendor, like who has like been especially clear about the structured content stuff for many years, we get this question all the time, because our page builder is like an array field with like objects, which is what it is. But it's not always that intuitive, right? So like, can't you build kind of like a visual thing for this stuff? And we should probably do that. But yeah, it's interesting.
I'll also say that I find some page builders completely inscrutable. Like, I was playing around with AEM recently, and I found it completely impossible to use. I could not understand it whatsoever. And it's all a visual experience, and you create an experience and you place it on a page and blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, what am I even looking at? Like, it was mind boggling, honestly.
Yeah. I've been wondering about that, because like the structured content CMSs get critiqued of being too abstract. It's like, what am I actually doing? Like, we need previews and so on. But when I log into like, not like Webflow is a wonderful product, but I log into it. They have turned CSS into boxes and inputs, basically. And CSS is a pretty complex system. And now we have to make a lot of choices about pixel values and border shadows and stuff, which you can do, but it's probably not content work. So I always wonder, like, why are we forcing people whose job it is to do great content to care about pixel values? That seems something like we should just decide in the design system or something.
Yeah.
But I feel I'm missing something here. But yeah, the person isn't in the room, I guess, maybe, to answer that.
So is there a place, so if I were to be part of this content authoring experience, right, I'm trying to build something new or change something existing, where does one go to get the standards, I guess, or the guidance, or where does one go to do the research on how a proper content authoring experience should work based on people's experiences?
There's a book coming out, right?
Yeah, I'm writing a book on this right now that'll be coming out before the end of the year. It has to come out before the end of the year, and but what I outline in the book is that the process of designing an authoring experience for your organization is very much like the process of designing the end user experience for your website, because your authors are users just like your end users are. And so the process of doing research, of prototyping potential things, of implementing them and testing them and then releasing them is largely, very similar to what we all do every day anyways. It's got a different tack to it. It's got a different set of sort of, balancing acts that have to go into it. Like one of the things that I've been saying is that in the principles of good form design have been well known for a long time. But one of the differences for your content authors is that, on the web, somebody might fill a contact form or a credit card form or an order form out once, but your content authors are going to fill out your content entry forms thousands of times, right? And so something that's painful, even if it's just slightly painful, is magnified over a much larger period. And so focusing, like the focus on reducing the cognitive load of those forms is much more important, right? And so, there are different things that you can bring best practices and principles into, but you also kind of have to think about from a different angle.
Like how,
I was
sorry,
as
go on.
on like the vendor representative, I also think like putting more expectations on vendors, because like one of our founders and kind of like product manager, he said something a couple years ago that kind of like sat with me, is like, if our text editor kind of like isn't working and so on, that's kind of like time that we are stealing from someone who wants to just go home and kind of like have dinner with the kids and stuff. It's like, it has impact, but it's so easy to forget that when you are in kind of like this software world and you're pushing tickets and stuff. So like putting that expectation on vendors, I think, is also important, because it's not always possible to express the best practices in the systems, because someone thought that this is how it should work, and I might not be right about that. So yeah.
I think an interesting space as well is the simplicity being one of the hardest things to get right. In my experience, it's very easy to give editors multiple ways of doing things, and that's perceived as being a good way of doing it, because we like choice, but with every sort of set of choices we have, that's more for the editor to decide, well, do I do it this way or do I do it that way, and what's the impact if I do it a particular way or another way. I mean, one of the things we're learning about we're with our move from Drupal 7 to 10 is that the way pages have been built in Drupal 7 doesn't necessarily map across to 10. And that, 2 pages in a Drupal 7 site can look the same, but actually they've been built very differently. And then that has an impact on how the longevity of that content and the structured, the nature, the sort of data structuring of the content. So I am an advocate for sort of more, for simpler ways of doing things. And, I'm a content designer by trade, so I'm always advocating for spending more time on good quality content rather than maybe focusing on features and getting excited by that kind of thing. And I understand the need for both, but often taking things away makes a better content authoring experience than adding like more options in for them to try and, you have to then build in the architecture to help them make the right choice is what I'm saying, which then adds something else into the CMS and makes it maybe less elegant and less streamlined for a person.
Like how does?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
I keep interrupting.
Yeah.
I'm so interested in this because thinking about kind of like professionals. Like I work mostly towards developers, and like developers have made a lot of tooling and kind of like stuff to make kind of like all these things they're doing all the time easier. But it's not easy to get into that. Like, it is a journey, right? And like, we have like these page builders that gives you the power of changing the hex value of the shadow. But what I don't see is like CMSs that has like super advanced find replace tooling. That makes a lot of sense for anyone who has done any meaningful migration in any meaningful large company, right? No, you have to kind of like order a database migration from a developer. But like, why don't we have like more of those content specific kind of like nerdy features in the systems, right? Like, so that can emerge from like, we can start somewhere simple, and then it's like we're talking about academics, right? I've done like weird things in Word to kind of like prepare a thesis. That's like way beyond most, but like I'm super happy that I have that thing. Like
maybe we should support latex in the CMS.
Yes, that's the answer. That's
Yeah.
latex for everyone.
The issue is that we're always chasing shiny toys, right? AI or something that makes the product sell. But I think we had this same conversation in a previous roundtable, is the actual things to look at the content as a whole and holistically. If you say I'm coming up with those features, might not really appeal to anyone in terms of selling the product. So unfortunately, we're kind of caught in that loop.
But I mean, I also think of this. I also think that there's a lot of things that are very simple that we could support in core CMSs that a lot don't. Like I think dealing with connected content is a big one, right? Like for instance, if you've got a blog post and it's an entity or a content type or whatever we want to call it, and then you've also got an author that's an entity or a content type, and you're creating a blog post and it's the first time that this author has ever appeared in your system, how do you get from that to creating that author without losing the context of the blog post that you're creating, right? And like, it's one of my great frustrations in the Drupal world is that this has not been solved in core Drupal in 20 years. Like they there are lots of contributed modules that you can get into that'll help you with this, but core Drupal has never ever bothered to address it. And Sanity did recently actually address it in its core product.
A
couple of years ago, yes. But I mean, you know, things like that are like these are the things that are like at the core. If we want people to do structured content, we want people to design their systems the right way. This is like a big example right there sitting in front of us of something that can make lives easier. It can make doing the right thing easier if we just put it together in the experience and support it. And I think that's a really big place where vendors can come to the table and say, you know, what are the things that our authors are doing that are hard, that like is always hard, not like hard for this specific use case, but always hard. How can we make it easier for them to do the right thing?
I think it's also like counting the cost of them doing it wrong as well, and showing how a CMS can help like resolve that problem, because just taking the connected content issue and like that getting wrong in the context of a web page means duplicated content, out of date content, and that all gives a poor impression of your website or whatever you're creating. And then, you know, that carries a cost, but both in terms of the time authors are spending, like making that right, and also like the human error and then the end experience. And I think like one of the things I try and do is put numbers on it to try and make that case to my own development team, who are quite keen on implementing new modules in Drupal. I'm always pushing for let's try and make the core stuff, the really important stuff easier, because that's actually going to push the numbers as well.
For the social media promotion of this webinar, do you have like an interesting number that came up?
Not necessarily with the CMS, but I start counting like how many times editors. So yeah, I mean, one of the workflows we have is publishing landing pages. So calculating how many of those there are across the web estate. It runs into the thousands. And then, you know, you estimate it takes an editor a day to produce one of those. Could you reduce it to a half a day? How much like more, you know, time they would have for other stuff if you took that away from them having to kind of do it through the CMS? Even just like back of an envelope calculations here, but for the university it works on scale because we have like a large community of publishers and a huge web estate. So for me, focusing on the things that people are doing all day every day, like updating staff lists, if we could make that easier. We know people have to do that all the time. Could we make that easier? Could we implement something that there's an automated checker to avoid staff contact details going out of date, events going out of date, that kind of thing? It would make the web estate look better. It would reduce the amount of content that's out there that we have to then like pay to support. and also save time too. So not off the top of my head because they would be incorrect, but like I'm always just counting. Yeah. I'm always trying to just keep counting and put those numbers in front of people when they'll listen.
Yeah,
nice
I think that
would
the
be
mental
awesome.
calculation is like enough for people to kind of like, okay, that's probably a lot of hours.
Yeah,
just over a week,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, and also a dashboard. I think I've seen it in a couple of CMSs where you can kind of see the amount of time it takes for a certain type of content type to go through. So I don't know, events.
Yeah.
It takes from once you set to draft to publish takes about 4 hours. XYZ takes longer. Those kind of metrics will help you validate that you're going the right direction, as well as get you funding in a way that you're actually saving money with.
I use like a very useful keylogger called Grammarly. And in the admin dashboard, it actually does that. It kind of like tells you how much time did your team save. It also tells you who didn't use Grammarly like this week. And this is where I kind of get like, this feels a bit iffy. Like
Negative nudge. Sludge,
oh yeah,
yeah. But yeah, it's a clever trick to show your product's value, I guess.
Yeah.
So I actually really like this idea of timing. God, I'm looking for my notebook. I wanted to write it down. Of timing, like which content types take the longest, or like which users take longest per content type and stuff like this, as like not like as a metric, more just like as another data point to understand. Like if one user is taking them 30 seconds to create a piece of content and one user is taking 2 minutes, like what's going wrong there, right? Or, you know, if one content type always takes 10 minutes versus 2, then what's happening there? You know, like as a metric of like trying to understand how your users are working. I'm kind of interested in that.
We just kind of like introduced telemetry in our products, and like it's always like, yeah, we are kind of like looking at data of your behavior, and people have different feelings about that, but like for us it is exactly, this is what we are like looking for, to understand like why are people just copy pasting, like why can't they feel welcome to just make the content in the thing, or as you say, like are they getting stuck, or are there errors being thrown? So it would be interesting to start kind of also feeding that data back to the user as well, and to the org, to kind of understand where the sticky points are, for sure. But like we have the data sources, so like it's not that hard to do.
And I think that would kind of help them really be more efficient. So my last question to you guys is, how and if a proper content author experience affects downstream, right? CX strategies or UX designer or even the end user of the site. Does it a good content authoring experience affect all of the things downstream of building the channel, whether it's a mobile app or a website?
I mean, I would certainly argue yes, because if your content experience is either not appropriate for the channels you're publishing to, or is very difficult to use and makes people miserable, then you're not going to end up with the best content for your organization. And anything that results in you not getting the best content for your organization is going to result in, you know, content failure down the line in one way or another. So I do think it's very important that it does hit the bottom line in many cases. But I'll also say that I think that, you know, there's a lot of aspects to that too. Like I've been advocating, for instance, for our, you know, Gov clients in particular, to think about hiring more web professionals in their agencies, people who really understand the content, who can work with the subject matter experts to make sure not only that the content is accurate, but also that it's appropriate for the web. That, you know, there's a lot, and that they have the time to do it, you know, that you're staffed appropriately, you know, content authoring, the experience, all of those things impact authoring experience too. Like if you're very harried because you've got too much work to do in your organizations and staffed appropriately, then we can do whatever we can in the system, but your, you know, organizational problems, like you can't fix organizational problems with technology. And so those things impact it as well, but there's only so much we can do there.
Any last comments? Anyone?
I was kind of like counting the time to AI. Like you had like a little mention around 33. But like from kind of like the vendor perspective, it's interesting because we're not just making content offering experiences for humans anymore. We're also making them for capable large language models. And what we found at Sanity is like they aren't that great at kind of like writing stuff. Like unless you kind of like are good with kind of like bending kind of like the thing inside of the semantic universe, like you're just getting very boring generic stuff that no one wants to read. But what it is good for is kind of like doing the boring stuff. The things like you mentioned kind of like the copy paste thing and like paragraph stuff in Drupal 10. Like again, not vendor agnostic, but like one of our demos was like, hey, I have like an outline from a Google Doc for a page building thing, or like just annotated simply with kind of like this is a thing, this is a call to action, and then the AI could just take that, look at the content model, and just get it into the right place. And like that's so much time spent saved. No one wants to do it if they don't have to, and no creativity were like curbed, right? So there are things like this as well that I think will probably kind of like impact this field a lot the coming years. Said the technologist, but yeah, there you go.
I think, yeah, I think it paying attention to it, I think it's like a missed trick. I got the content authoring. I think, you know, I feel as well, it maybe goes into the realm of, you know, systems controlling the way we work. And it's a bit old school to think that you have a system, you have a manual to use it. And I would like to see that flipped in the space of CMSs, where it's the way people work is dictating the way systems work, not just for CMSs, but more broadly as well. I really don't want to work in a situation where people are afraid of breaking a system or doing something wrong or feeling that they can't use it. So for me, it kind of feeds into that bigger piece of like humans and society and technology, to be honest.
All right. Thank you so much, guys, for your time today. I learned something new. But looking forward to Greg's book. Get your move done, Greg, and get the book out and stop making us wait. Also,
I'll try.
There've been some really good comments if you guys want to check out after this webinar and a roundtable, and then try to answer them. Thanks again for your time.
Thank
Thanks for having
you.
us.
Thank you.